All right, welcome to episode 2 of the Ozheads podcast, brought to you from
The Standard
at the
in
Smith House
Nashville.
here in Nashville, Tennessee. Thank you for letting us stink up your beautiful facility here.
Historic facility.
Yeah, historic.
Andrew Jackson got married here.
Did he really?
Yeah, apparently so. They have a pretty illustrious history for this place. An example of Italian and antebellum architecture. They have a whole kind of write-up about it. But I mean, apparently this place was around from the Civil War era too.
My first recollection of the Standard was a sales meeting dinner we had back in the CAO days.
Yeah.
We
I
ran
remember.
up quite a tab that night. I remember that.
Yeah.
The guys were drinking Pappy Van Winkle before Pappy Van Winkle was a big thing, but it was still, it was pretty good.
Well, they also have like a brawl over here, a gentleman's brawl.
Yeah.
It's almost like not bare knuckle, but close to it. That's my understanding.
I think that happened at the sales meeting.
Yeah.
Actually. So let's kick it off. What are you smoking right now?
Yeah, I'm smoking a blend that my friend Kendall Culbertson at the Outlaw gave me. He has quite a lot. I had no idea that he had so many of his own blends that he's making at the Outlaw. I was there on Friday.
Kansas City, right?
I visited a couple of Kendall's locations, and his wife Liesel, they run it, and they've got a great staff.
Yep.
And so visited a few of those locations, then went to visit my friend Kurt Diebel. That was actually a really interesting visit. I actually bought this from there. This is a Kurt actually has a fascinating part of his business where he not only has, pipes and cigars and humidors, but he has all these cool gift items that are curated for men.
Mm-hmm.
So apparently he goes to this trade show every year that is just a bunch of gift items. And mainly the gift items he was telling me are for women, but he has to go through every aisle and scour them for like men specific gifts. And he actually has curated a pretty like amazing collection of items, for men. So I bought this. This was one of them. This is all granite, and I would have matches that are long enough, but I didn't bring them. But you can like strike any portion of
That's
this
a cool
to
idea.
light.
I like that.
To light a cigar.
I like
So-
the tchotchke.
So I thought it was great. Next time I'll actually
Kurt's
use this.
a fun guy. He's really into the Kansas City Royals and baseball, and he does this Kansas City Royals summer camp for guys. Like they go and they wear the uniform and everything. And I remember a TAA show. He pulled out this baseball card of himself and showed it to Mike and I. And for those of you who don't know Kurt, he looks exactly like he would have been in that era with, all these guys. He has the mustache and he's like, he's got the whole look and everything.
Yeah, totally. He looks like somebody from a movie.
100%.
Sure,
100%. So how was Kansas City?
It was
Good trip?
great. I mean, the thing that I found like so great about Kansas City is the people. People there are like really down to earth and nice. I went and did an event at Fireside Cigar that was in like Olathe, I believe it's pronounced, Kansas, and people there were so nice. I mean, it reminded me a lot of Nashville when Nashville was kind of
When Nashville was
growing,
nice.
and that was great. I mean, it's the kind of place that like I could see people like the allure and appeal of wanting to live there. It's like people, they want to know you just to know you.
Yeah.
There's no like hidden agenda of like, what can you do for me? What can you get from me? That kind of thing. So it made me leave there, and then like
Was the whole place like Super Bowl heavy, like leading up to?
Yeah, no, actually they were not. None of them.
Huh.
I mean, they were like pretty. Most of the folks there, a lot of people were wearing Kansas City like colored gear or jerseys, but they had like a really kind of nice humble confidence. They weren't like cocky at all, but they were confident. I mean, they believed that. They believed that they were going to win,
and they
you know
did.
what I mean.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of like nice. There was no cockiness, zero whatsoever. There was just sort of a quiet belief in their team.
You got Patrick Mahomes. It's kind of hard not to be confident, right?
Yeah, and Andy Reid is such a staple of a coach too. And so I mean, it was kind of cool to be there, and they were so hospitable and cool and nice, and none of them bragged about their team. So I thought that was like interesting and unique. I mean, it wasn't like they weren't in your face.
Right. And then what else is coming up this month? We've got TPE coming up, Tobacco Plus Expo, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We'll be over there talking about Bosphorus and like sort of like re-emphasizing that and trying to get it into stores that don't have it
That
already.
show, from my understanding, because I haven't done the TPE
I've
yet,
never been to it, so I'm
right?
looking forward to it.
Did you ever do NATO back when it was
No,
the
I never
NATO?
did. I never
Okay, so
did.
neither did I. So that was the artist formerly known as NATO, which is now
Mm,
Tobacco Plus Expo, which I think it's even something else now. But at any rate, now the cigar, premium cigar segment of it has really come up, and maybe like the vape and the other stuff is kind of like still at the same level.
subsided.
Yeah, a little bit. So it'll be interesting. I've seen that show quietly grow over the years, so I think it should be a good one.
But also, Crown Heads launched Pastelitos. Yeah, that was a limited edition kind
We
of
did.
run.
That was a thing we did with our good friend Ernesto Perez Carrillo. I started talking to Ernie about Pastelitos back third or fourth quarter of last year because we all seasonally Crown Heads puts out like a short format cigar for people like for the winter months. So we've done like a shots for La Imperiosa, for Minutos for La Imperiosa, shots for Jericho Hills, shots for Juarez. And then last year we didn't do anything. So I was like, oh, this would be a good time to bring it back. So we did it in the Le Carême blend, little 4x54 round with a little pigtail head. Ernie thought that was a great idea. And we call it pastelitos, which is like a Cuban puff pastry kind of dessert.
Mm-hmm.
So it was kind of on brand. And interestingly enough, I got a message on my DM, like if somebody asked me, would it pair well, would the cigar pair well with a pastelito? And I said, and sarcastically, I kind of said, I don't know. Why don't you send me one? I'll let you know. So Friday, we had a delivery at the office of this box that was FedEx to us. And I opened it up and it was like a dozen pastelitos from Miami.
Oh, wow.
So it's pretty cool. And
Did it pair well?
I ate it. I didn't pair it. I mean, just
So that was the whole point.
I know. But I had Thaddeus try one first. I was like, oh, if Thaddeus lives, then nobody's trying to poison us.
What did it look
So
like, a pastelito?
it was like this little triangular puff pastry, and it was filled with like guava in it.
With
Like
guava?
guava, like jam kind of a thing. And
I mean, you wouldn't think of guava pairing
it was
well with a cigar, though.
Yeah, I wouldn't, but they tasted good. So I was like,
Yeah.
I was like, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
So let me ask you this question, because this is, back when we were at CAO, we didn't do these quarterly kind of LE releases.
Or monthly for Crown Heads.
Yeah, like how did you kind of fall into that sort of rhythm?
That was actually kind of by accident, really. The very first one we did was Mule Kick for 4Kicks, which is back in 12, I think. And what had happened was I was at a trade show it was IPCPR at that time, it wasn't PCA. And I was sitting on a couch like this with Ernie. And he told me, he said, hey, for 4Kicks, we've got this wrapper, this Habano wrapper that's too dark for the regular line. I can kind of mix it into each of the box, put them at the bottom. I said, no, I want them all color sorted perfectly, 24 per cabinet. I said, but we can do something with it. Like, what's the yield? And he says, I could probably get maybe 4,000 or 5,000 cigars out of this wrapper. I said, all right, let me think about something. And then later that afternoon, we started talking about working out. And so Ernie says, oh, bro, you ever do this thing called a Mule Kick? And I was like, what are you talking about? And literally, if you can imagine Ernesto Perez Carrillo getting down on the floor, like doing like this push up into a mule kick kind of a thing. And I was like, this is kind of surreal. And but then like a light went off and I'm like, mule kick. And so after he finished his little exercise, display thing, I leaned into him and I said, hey, what if we would do an LE and we'll call it, 4Kicks Mule Kick? And that's literally by accident and necessity. That's how we started. And it was, I believe, 400 10 count boxes. And they sold out immediately. And it just one thing led to another. So it was just like, then people started expecting what's new.
Was that before Las Calaveras?
That was before Calaveras, yeah. Absolutely before Calaveras.
So then that kind of like gave you the sort of confidence to want to do a limited edition that might be like a seasonal release type of.
And Calaveras, honestly, to me, was just going to be a one and done. I had no intention of making it an annual thing. I was just in the factory 2 years later with the Garcias.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked, I had this idea to do Las Calaveras. And so Jaime brought out 3 blends and said, here you go, that kind of a thing. And Pete Johnson was with me on that trip. Pete was my entree into that factory. So I owe him a lot of credit for that. And I remember smoking the samples and I really liked one. So I said, Pete, do me a favor, smoke this, tell me what you think. And, I remember he goes, yeah, this is really good. It's kind of meaty. It doesn't taste like anything out of this house yet. So I think it's good. I was like, all right, I agree. And then I started, I said, but shouldn't it take more than 3 samples, to get to this like mythical blend or whatever? And he just told me, he's like, look, dude, he goes, when you start with good tobacco, he goes, our job as brand owners is not to fuck it up. And that stuck in my mind for forever. And he was right. And that cigar went on to get these crazy ratings and just got a following and just built.
So it's interesting because like with Pete, I went to college at Southern Cal.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't start there. I went to University of Denver and I transferred into SC because I wanted to get into an acting conservatory program that was like, my father was like, how can you make money doing that crap? And I was like, if I audition and get into a school that's like really good at it, then will you support, my decision? He's like, well, okay, then I guess you must be okay, decent. So let's do it. So, but then so eventually when I graduated from SC in 93, then I was visiting all these smoke shops during the day, selling at the time like our pipes and humidors. And then we just got into cigars in 94. And one of the customers that was like a key pipe customer was Gus's Smoke Shop.
Yeah, sure.
In Sherman Oaks.
Yeah.
Run by this guy named Jimmy Hurwitz, who, was always really kind to me. And I would go in there and he would have like a clerk that would work at the front. And the clerk was like, he had tattoos and he...
Before everybody had tattoos.
Yeah. And he was like really into pipes and tobaccos and some cigars too.
Mm-hmm.
And that clerk was Pete. So Pete and I kind of, became friends from that whole experience. And then he moved to Grand Havana Room and, then he kind of like went down that path from there and then the cigars and stuff like that. So whenever I see him, I mean, it's almost like I don't know how many years, that's like a long history that I go back.
Yeah. I remember I met him in 96 at the trade show in Cincinnati.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking about that because I said, okay, this, on the pod today, we're going to talk about the trade show coming up and everything. Then I thought, what was my first trade show? And I had just started working at CAO for your dad in April of 96. And then like literally like 3 months later, we're at this trade show and I'm just like, fuck, and I'll never forget that, man. Cause it was like, we rented 2 U-Haul trucks, loaded up this booth on these U-Haul trucks and drove them to Cincinnati. And at the time, humidors were a big thing for CAO.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So Jono insisted that this trade show booth be made of solid wood.
Yeah.
Like, nowadays it's like everything is contemporary. Let's make it out of this lightweight material, cut down on the drayage. This thing literally weighed a ton.
Yeah.
And we had to like put it up all by ourselves. And it was
a beast.
It was a beast.
Yeah.
It was a beast. But you talk about trial by fire. I remember we were right across the booth space from Cigar Aficionado. And at that time, Marvin Shankin had JFK's humidor, like under glass, and like he had armed guards around it. And I was just like, wow, this is so cool. I was just like, I was in awe. And that's when I met Pete. I remember seeing Pete and he had tattoos and I had some tattoos at the time. And I was just like, and we just became fast friends.
Yeah.
It's just, it's interesting how things evolve. I never would have thought, however many years later, we'd still all be doing this, but that was a kick, man.
That's what I remember, like this guy, David Ravandi. Do you remember him?
Of course.
They did our first ads. The Diamonds
awesome.
Are the man's best friend too, with like these naked lady ads or something.
Yeah, right.
And he's like, Tim, you call me Murat, my given name. Hey, Mr. Murat, can you introduce me to other people in the cigar business?
Yes.
That can do that ads. So
Ravandi
I figured that like, at the time Borhani was in LA with Bahia.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, all right, come with me to the trade show. I'll introduce you to some people. And then I introduced him to Tony and then he did some Bahia ads. They were actually pretty good ads,
Tony was hot at the time.
Yeah. And I mean, it was like pictures of him, like looked very kind of Havana-esque, and with like the hat, and stuff like this. He might have gotten somebody else. I'm trying to think of who else he did ads for. But
I think not to go way off target, but he started his own tequila.
Oh yeah, Uno Dos Tres.
What was it?
It's called Uno Dos Tres.
He was 20 years ahead of the game, man. He started.
He was ahead of his time.
He really was. Wasn't it like Casa Noble?
Yeah, it was
Casa
Casa Noble.
Noble, right?
But he had like this line called uno, dos, tres, which uno is like the first part of like when you blend a tequila, dos was the other, and tres you combine the elements or something like this. I remember I went to like I was in some city with my kids and I saw it on like the menu. It was like a tequila bar and it said uno, dos, tres. I'm like, I know that guy.
It's still around?
I don't know.
I
I
thought
think
he
it
would have
is.
sold it or something by now.
I don't know, but he was ahead of the curve on
He
the
was
tequila
way ahead
for
of
sure.
his times, man.
So
he actually, I remember he gave me like some of my first Cubans, and he was, he goes, "Oh, brother, you ever have Epi number 2, Epi twos, and it was Hoy de Monterey Epicure number 2s, and that was like his favorite Cuban cigar at the time.
I'll never forget. I mean, when I was living in LA to get to Hawaii to do events with like Marvin Chang, our buddy, was not that bad. You know, I mean, if you're going to fly anywhere to go to Hawaii,
that's the one I look forward to.
LA. So
yeah, of course.
Ravandi went with me to like one of these events with Marvin. And he's like, oh, there is a shabu shabu place. I'm like, what the hell is
that?
shabu shabu? It's incredible. You need shabu shabu.
What is
shabu shabu? Is these thin slices of beef. And it's like you got this hot pot in front of you that's boiling water, and you take the thin slices of beef and you boil it into the water, and you take it out and you put it in like all kinds of different sauces, and they give you like vegetable. I mean, this is like kind of a thing in in the Orient.
Right.
So I was introduced to shabu shabu by Ravandi in Hawaii.
That's a new one on me. I've been to Hawaii a few times. I've never heard shabu shabu.
Oh yeah. We've got to do it. It's great.
That's funny.
And then when I would go and work on like packaging stuff back in the days when we were making Sopranos, in LA, like they had shabu shabu there. So I was like, oh, okay, I know shabu shabu. And then they had drunken shrimp. Do you ever know what that is?
No.
That's like shrimp that is like they put the shrimp in white wine. And the shrimp like drink the white wine, and then then
you eat the drunken shrimp.
Then
literally.
you eat the drunken shrimp.
Interesting.
And it tastes good because it's got this white wine flavored shrimp. I'm sure now we're going way off base.
Yeah, no, bring it back to cigars. Bring it back to cigars.
So that's cool. So then you got into the habit of developing all of these like interesting concepts.
Yeah. So I mean, the LE thing has been fun. It's just another creative outlet, and I mean, I'm sure you probably have some ideas in the back of your mind on Bosphorus, even though we just got it out of the the ground.
Yeah, well, I mean, part of it is that I've been going out and visiting all these different stores in different markets that are like kind of cigar friendly markets right now, meaning like less taxation, that kind of thing. But we just got this vertical rating where you have probably the highest vertical rating in the history of my experience being in the cigar business, 293s, 92, and a 90. So I mean, you want to promote that and kind of get people to try it first, so mainly the focus is around that. But I mean, part of like, for me, whenever I would be in the field, I would get ideas from people and what they're liking and what they're smoking and what they're enjoying and that kind of stuff.
And I'm assuming the feedback you're encountering on the road has been really positive for
Bosphorus. Yeah. It's been great. I mean, but again, still there's a lot of people that probably haven't tried it. So, you want to go out there and tell people the story behind it and, the why.
Yeah.
So I think the why of why you want to do something is super important. And so,
well, you remember our good friend George Brightman, he told me there are 3 ways to build a brand: sample, sample, sample.
Yeah.
And I think when you get that cigar in particular in somebody's hand, it sells itself to a large degree. I mean, even if this mic wasn't even on right now, I would tell you that in the warehouse, that what I'm smoking, a good bit amount is Bosphorus. I'll start off with that little 50. The 50 is perfect in the morning with a cup of coffee. Yeah. It's like 4x50.
Yeah, 4x50.
It's just a great little size. I love that size. And then work my way up to the 52. I mean, I'm not even a big ring gauge guy. Like, I don't usually go north of like 48, 50. Even 52 is large for me. But that 55 it's an easy cigar to smoke, and it's so damn good.
I was at an event in the event that I did that was at Fireside Cigars. There was a gentleman over there that said that, why don't you do a cigar that is a Lonsdale or a Lancero? But I mean, the thing of it is that like Lonsdales and Lanceros are like
a kiss of death.
So niche, you know what I mean? Like you kind of like, you want to honor those sizes, and I mean, because they're cool sizes. But the reality is, do they sell? Do a lot of people like them and buy them? And
my retort to that request has always been like, Lancero is the most popular size that doesn't sell. I mean, you could put it as a one and done like an LE, and I think it moves fairly well. But you add that as a regular production size to all these Lancero freaks, it will sit there and collect dust.
Yeah. I mean, therefore, like for that, like it makes sense to do an LE in that,
Yeah.
because then like those that like it can like, you know, buy it and buy more of it
You
than they
know,
might on average.
well, one of my favorite LEs we did back in the CIO day was on the CIO Maduro was the A size. Remember the
Yeah,
A?
actually, I love that. That's
That
great.
was it was like a 9x47, and it had a soft press to it as well.
Yeah.
And it was that was just a joy to smoke for like 2.5, 3 hour smoke. But I could see that in Bosphorus. That would be pretty cool.
And then people, they ask a lot about the box press too. And I mean, I personally like box press. I mean, I don't know. I just like how it seems to be so concentrated of a flavor to me. And so we kind of talked about that and like, the methodology of box press. I mean, like some people, they have it round and then they kind of press it with like plank on the bottom, plank on the top.
Right.
Some people have molds that will mold it into that shape, which
Yeah.
generally means it's going to have sharper corners. And then the traditional box press, though, is like you basically had a box of brown cigars that was like overstuffed, and you had the lid that was a little bit open, and they would nail it shut.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like
That's how
the
the Cubans
box
did it.
is
Yeah.
pressing it, thus the name box press.
I like
So-
Ernie's version of it, like how he does with Bosphorus. It's like a softer press. It's not like that real.
Yeah, it
90
doesn't have
degree-
sharp corners.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of that.
I'm not a fan of the sharp corners either. I mean, again, that was more. We did that before at CAO, and that was like
That was Perdomo.
and
Perdomo did
that was like really kind of molds that were in that shape, which is also a smart way to do it. But then you got like really sharp corners from that, which then it looks like, I don't know, it looks like it's almost a little bit too exact.
I agree.
You know?
All right, this is more natural.
Yeah.
Ernie's always told me it's difficult to make a pressed cigar, just because you can't overfill the cigar. Obviously, when you press it, you're going to have breakage. So it's definitely a balancing act. It's an art, and I think they hit it out of the park with that.
I also find it interesting, and we got into this during the event too, is that people were interested in like the different types of how you roll a filler, like the, one that's entubado, where you have it like, kind of with,
you create the passages within the bunch.
And you roll it in a more circular fashion. And then the estrujado, which is more like kind of an accordion-esque type of a way of making it, so, and I think that Ernie said that he does both.
I think
Am I
he does.
wrong about that?
No, you're not.
Yeah.
I just can never keep track of which one he does on which brand or which
Well, he was
line.
saying in like Bosphorus, for example, he did both.
Okay.
So, it's worth kind of like digging into more about like,
We need to have Ernie
what
on here.
leaves are you doing like entubado versus estrujado,
Oh, man. I'd love to pick his brain for an hour or two on this.
Yeah.
It's just such an encyclopedia of knowledge.
The other one
tobacco.
that came into is the whole sort of like blending. How much blending do you get involved with versus like the manufacturer? And I find that to be like kind of who the manufacturer that you're working with is,
Mm-hmm.
and how open, he or she may be. And
Completely
being
different
involved.
house to house. I agree 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How has that been for you?
For me, like, you've got, I'll give you an exact opposite of being involved is like with the Garcias, with Jaime. Like I'll tell them what I want, what I'm looking for, and kind of verbalize it. And then I'll get a couple of renditions of it. And that's pretty much it. And then they don't really go, okay, we put a half a leaf of Seco and a leaf of Isa. They don't go into that.
Right.
It's just basically Nicaragua. There's not a lot of pulling the curtain back with them, but they're just so damn good at what they do that you just go, okay, thank you. you move on. Other manufacturers, it's a little bit more involved where they'll tell you, exactly the leaf and how, the proportions and the ratios and
Yeah, I like that. I like it.
I like being a little bit more
of
involved with it for
totally.
sure. But
It becomes a two-way street.
yeah, it's just a different way of working.
But what I find also is that like, a lot of these manufacturers, they're living kind of down in Central America and they don't have the opportunity, most of them, to go into the market and visit stores and talk to the consumers and talk to retailers and find out what it is that they want or what it is that their consumers are liking or buying. And I mean, so it's our job to kind of filter through all of that and kind of try to deliver to them that kind of aggregate knowledge of what we learned, and so that can be conveyed through a blend, because you don't want to come up with a blend that is not to the liking of what the current palate is in the market. You know, I mean, or I'm sure like size related too. Any of your size related kind of choices based on anything other than, I mean, is it
Personal preference
historical?
for me, I mean, I remember when we started, the first Crown Heads line was 4 kicks,
Mm-hmm.
and I was just adamant that we had to have a 5 5/8 by 46 in the lineup, and that went back to. Do you remember La Traviata?
Yeah.
So La Traviata, I said let's have a 5 5/8 because I've always loved that size, and so I just kind of leaned into that and continued it on with 4 kicks. And I think to this day we've always done that Batola in almost every line we've done to this point. The only thing I'm like adamantly opposed to is like getting into the 660s, right?
I like 660s
I
though.
know you do. I know you do. It's never been something that I personally smoked.
Yeah.
So I can't get behind it. And a funny story about that, when we hired, Miguel Shodell, our national sales manager, obviously, we hired him in 17. And he was constantly pushing me to be in the 6x60 market because, dude, we're not in the 6x60. We got to do it. I wouldn't do it. And I said, I just won't do it. And eventually I just caved and I said, all right, I'll tell you what, you pick the brand. We'll do a 660 as an LE. And if it hits, we'll add it to the line. And if it doesn't hit, then don't ask me about it again. And we did it. It was for Luminosa. It was a 6x60. It was called Gigantes. And every day that we didn't sell something, I would take a picture of the pallets of product that weren't moving and I would text it to him. And it was a complete fiasco for us.
But I would argue, to be devil's advocate, that maybe it was the wrong blend for that size.
I told him to pick the blend. I mean? I told him to pick the blend.
Because, I mean, like, for example, when CAO Gold, we didn't really have a true 6x60. The closest we came to it was one that we did that was more of a perfecto size.
Right.
And that might have gotten up to a 58 ring gauge in the middle of it. But I don't know. I mean, the
Brasilia, the 660s.
Yeah. I mean, I find that like maybe in spicier blends, then a 6x60 may work better, arguably.
Yeah.
I mean, I could be wrong about that, but I mean,
that was the Amazon, wasn't it?
Yeah.
The Amazon.
I mean, the Amazon we did very well with in Brasilia, and that was a 6x60.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. We're tinkering with some 6x60s for another. We're working on like kind of a extension of Bosphorus. That we'll be talking about that, I'm sure, soon.
Yeah.
But
drop a comment below if you like 6x60s.
Yeah.
Or if you don't like 6x60s. I don't know.
Or if there's something else that you want us to talk about, then
that too.
We're aggregating that too, and we'll talk about that next time we're on.
Absolutely. Going back to Bosphorus though, one of the things I like about like that 55, that it's a 555, right?
Yeah, that's like my favorite size, 5.5 by 55.
What's nice is that trunk press makes it easier. Like the mouthfeel is easier than if it was a true 55 ring gauge cigar. To me personally, I like the way it feels, and it smokes so well because of the larger ring gauge. You have more. I think you have more complexity. You have more filler in there, and it's a home run.
Somehow we stumbled across like a 5.5 by 55 for Brasilia, and we called it Brasilia box press. And they just, I don't know, it just tasted better there. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was interesting. Remember, we were down you actually weren't able to make that trip. We just recently came down to the factory and we did, I told the Carrillos, I said, the factory that we used to work with for Brasilia, which was, Latin cigars, and they called it CAO Fábrica de Tabacos because we had so much production there that was mainly CAO, that, I had them actually make puros out of like, I think I had calculated we used 40 different types of tobacco from 21 different countries. So like Nicaragua, there might be like 4 or 5 different regions that we're using, but Cameroon might be one. So they would make like puros out of each one of those tobaccos. So it's almost like getting to know the spices in your spice cabinet. So I asked Ernesto to do the same thing, and he did. So when we went down there at the beginning of the year with, all of our salesmen, we had like a blind taste where we had the wrappers, the binders, and all the fillers that he was mainly using. And that was a great experimentation because then you could kind of like, for example, like Dominican Olor, a lot of people picked up like brown spices like cinnamon, nutmeg, cumin maybe a little bit. And then I wrote like notes in the margin as like what flavors I was identifying. And, I kept it so the next time I go down there, or if I have a discussion with him, I could say, can we try it with a little bit of whatever?
Right.
I know that like when he wants to give something a little bit more oomph, he'll add some Piloto Cubano to it, which I liked that tobacco a lot on its own independently. Obviously, like Esteli Ligero I liked too. Which,
ASP. Oh.
Yeah, which, that's That's, you know, the other one that was like surprising was Hamastran, Ligero. That
Mm-hmm.
was like a complete, you know, pepper bomb. You know, it was kind of like wow when you kind of, and that was actually for Brasilia. Brasilia was Hamastran dominant
Mm-hmm.
with a Arapiraca wrapper from Brazil.
It's a
And
spice bomb.
but Arapiraca, funny enough, I smoked it recently, like on its own, and I thought it was like kind of very floral. You know, sort of like not pretty, not that interesting
Mm-hmm.
on its own. So I mean, I think it has to do with like what are the different components that you're putting with
100%.
it, you know, to make it. I mean, you're making like you're cooking. I said to Ernesto, I said this is like cooking, and he's like, no, you're right. It is like cooking because if you think about it, you're kind of putting the blend together, and then you're allowing it to marinate
Mm-hmm.
for a while, or marry in this case in the aging room. Um, and then, you know, once a lot of that moisture evaporates, then you can get to like, what are the, you know, what nuances are you
And then
tasting?
even from there to when you get them up here in the States, they taste differently,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then even when you get them to the States, it's like typically if Ernie sends me a bundle of samples, I take them out of the cello, put them all on my desk, and then I'll smoke like one a day. And it evolves still to that point. The taste changes and it really starts to formulate and you go, okay, this is where it's going to go.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a process. And he's become really like his son, like Ernie Jr. will tell you, he's become meticulous about it. Like he'll start on a blend and it'll take, I think his son told me it took him like 3 years on pledge before he said, okay, I'm going to release it now. And he's like, Dad, come on, hurry up. We got to get this thing to market eventually. What are you doing? You know, but you know, it paid off. I mean, that got the highest rated cigar of all time in Cigar Aficionado magazine, a 98. So man knows what he's doing for
Well, a
sure.
lot of it nowadays is that like you don't want to release something or have your, in our case, like your name on it. I'm sure like with Crowned Head's name on it, unless you feel like it's, you know, something that you feel really kind of proud to have your name
Correct.
on it. Otherwise, you know, we don't want to be in the position of rushing it.
Exactly.
You know, I'd rather it be like kind of right and you're proud of it and you can kind of, you know what I mean?
100%. Absolutely.
That's why like after I calculated I have 40 years experience indirectly in the cigar business, that after 40 years, it's like we have our 10,000 hours, like, you know, Malcolm Gladwell would say that we learned something after 40
It
years.
takes that
being
long.
in the business.
I would say so. Yeah. A lot of people just nowadays don't have the patience to wait, you know, and just wait for that right blend to come in and wait for it to, I mean, we ran into it with what you've been working on behind the scenes, you know, it's like,
Yeah.
okay, should we rush it and put it out? No. You made the decision, to your credit. No, it's not right. Let's wait. And when the time is right, then we're going to release it. You know, it would have been an easy, for lack of a better word, it would have been a cash grab, right? But you, to your credit, said, we're going to wait until this thing is right. And then we can present it the way it should be presented.
Yeah. And I mean, you know, part of it also is that like, it's fun. You know, people ask me like, why do you want to get back into the business? And for me, it was because I love cigars. I love how it makes people feel. I love how it brings people together, no matter what your walk of life is. It's an affordable luxury. And almost never have I gone to do a cigar promotion that people are not in a good mood.
Yeah.
Or not kind of relaxed or not kind of open to whatever dialogue or conversation. And that's another aspect that I really enjoy about the cigar business. I mean, I'm sure that like, you know, I know you communicate with a lot of people like via online. Is it one like online where people are more kind of um, maybe like direct to the point, or they say stuff that maybe they may not say in person?
Probably, because I think there's always that shield of just the keyboard, more or less. So they'll ask you
Mhm.
very direct questions and things like that. But it's always in good natured. It's never like, you know, I don't get a lot of crazy people or anything like that. It's
Right,
always
right.
people that really are interested in the process or fascinated with what it takes to get to that point. Or sometimes you get like, how do I get in the business type of thing, that's the hardest question in the world to answer. It's like, you know, a little bit of hustle, a little bit of this, and a whole lot of luck. You know, opportunity. What is that phrase? When opportunity and preparation come together.
Yeah,
That's, you know.
yeah.
So, but you know, for the most part, I like the aspect of social media because it lets you have that consumer engagement that you wouldn't have normally had, say, 15 years ago or when we were at CAO, so it's kind of made the world a lot smaller in that regard.
I always say that people should, if they're interested in like entering in from a sales perspective, is the way to go. Because if you're selling, you're visiting all these accounts and you're interacting with the retailer, and eventually you're interacting with the consumer, and you get an opportunity to see what their habits are, what they like, what they may not like, what their sensitivity is to like certain things like price, for example, or size, that kind of thing. And I think it really kind of, if somebody's like interested in like, how do I get in the cigar business? I would encourage people to like look at just getting in however you can. Number
Even
one,
brick and mortar, tobacconist,
number
for sure.
Working in sales. Because I remember like my father and had a cousin, and he would say that you don't have sales, you don't have a business.
100%.
So, I think it's a really kind of underrated and a valuable way of kind of breaking in and getting into the business.
I mean,
however you can.
two guys that come to my mind that started off in brick and mortar is Pete Johnson and Michael Herklotz. Both of those guys cut their teeth working at brick and mortar. I'm sure there's a lot more that I'm not thinking of. But I mean, that's really where you learned it's one thing, like I know our SKUs and I know, what we do, and I can tell you wrapper, binder, filler, but when you've got to command an entire humidor with 400 different brands and 1,600 or 2,000 facings, and those things, that's a heck of an education to start off with.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's true. It's not easy either. I mean, it's got to be one of those things that you like love and you're passionate about, because if you don't have the love, you don't have the passion. I mean, I think that's like part of, you've got to have a lot of stick-to-itiveness.
Yeah. And it's not an easy business,
No.
it's not, I mean,
people think that it is.
yeah.
But it's
people watch
not.
this and they're like, oh, there's those two guys smoking cigars and doing nothing. It's like, there's a lot behind the scenes in terms of just the business aspect of it, of the projections and the purchase orders and the timing. You're dealing with an agricultural product,
right.
Which you're at the mercy of, weather, soil, harvest, labor, taxes, all these things that come into play. And then take that, and then you're doing it with 4 different factories at one time. And then you're dealing with bands and packaging and boxes and supply chain. It's a juggling act. It really is. But it's one that we love, and we're still here doing it. However many years later, I wouldn't want to.
That's because we love the product, right? We love 100%. The product.
I love the product,
the nuance and the flavor, and
I like the process of it. I like the romance of growing something from a seed into this plant, harvesting, cultivating it, fermentation, and then compiling it into these dead leaves into something that we enjoy.
And somebody asked me, like, do you believe in pairings? And I mean, I love pairings. I mean, I think pairings work really well with cigars, whether it's like bourbon or coffee or wine or
rum,
beer or rum. But it's one of these things that, like, I remember I had a conversation with Julian Van Winkle from Pappy Van Winkle, and because some people are like, oh well, I firmly believe that if you have a good palate for cigars, you'll have a good palate for like a lot of other things, like bourbon, wine, spirits of all kinds, food. But it doesn't mean that like you're going to be successful at it, because the nuance of doing business to come up with a bourbon, for example, you have to deal with different distributors in different markets and different laws, and it's harder than it looks on the outside. It looks really 100%. Sexy on the outside, whether it's cigars or bourbon.
It does,
but it's not as easy as it looks.
No, it's probably harder because of the fact that we are talking about an agricultural product,
right?
It's not like you're making widgets on a machine. You can just press the button and go, okay, we need 10,000 more because somebody in Ohio ordered this. So it's not like that, right? So there's a lot of moving parts to it, but we'll get into all that in future episodes. We'll be at
the TPE coming up, and then after that will be the Big Smoke. It's Whiskey Fest. First time I'll be doing a Big Smoke in like over a decade, so I'm looking forward to that.
Wow, that's exciting.
And then the Great Smoke that our friends Abe is doing down in Fort Lauderdale.
It's gonna be a busy couple months for you.
So looking forward to that. And then
awesome.
But if there are other questions that people want to hear us kind of explore and talk about, then just submit them in
drop a comment below.
Drop a comment, and then we can
jump
look
on
at them
those.
and then get into it.
Sounds good, man. Well,
Awesome.
safe travels with everything.
Thanks,
Keep
man.
crushing it with Bosphorus. I can't wait
Thanks.
for the next one. And until the next one, keep smoking Crown Heads, keep smoking OFC, and we'll see you on the next one.
Thank you.